This is DJ REM from Rock Addict Radio, and I have Matt from the band Pharaoh. Good day, sir.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So, what's going on with the band right now? What are you guys up to?
Well, the album came out in the United States this past Tuesday. It came out in Europe, I think, a week earlier. And now we are just getting ready to do... we have one show booked in May in Chicago, but hopefully we're going to be booking some shows locally on the East Coast, and then we might actually do a little touring later. So we are rehearsing, and yeah, that's a new thing for Pharaoh in and of itself. We've never really rehearsed before, so now once a week we're getting together and banging out tunes, and yeah, we're pretending to be a real band.
That's awesome. How long have you guys all been together, though?
The band's been around since 1997. That's when the band was formed by me and the drummer Chris Black. At the time, we had another guitar player as well, but he only lasted a couple months before he decided it wasn't really his thing. We added bassist Chris Kearns in 1998, and the three of us recorded a 4-song demo that also included a cover of Aces High by Iron Maiden. And we were going to release that song and another song on an Iron Maiden tribute album that was coming out, and we needed a singer. So we had sort of auditioned a couple people, just got tapes from them, and none of them were really working out. And at the time, I was talking to my friend Jim Dofka, who is just a killer guitar player from Pittsburgh. And he was in a band with Tim Amar. And around that time, Tim had done the demo for Control Denied with Chuck Schuldiner, but Chuck had decided to put Control Denied on the back burner and concentrate on Death. And sort of at the same time, Jim and Tim kind of had a falling out. So Jim's like, man, you can have Tim if you want him. So he gave me his number. I called him up. He did that demo, and, we've been the same 4 guys ever since. So I guess it was late 98, 99 that Tim came on board, and it's been the 4 of us ever since.
That's very cool. You guys have been together for quite a while now. That's good.
Time flies.
Yeah, no doubt. So how is it that you guys just started rehearsing as of recently? I mean, how did you guys do things before?
The hard way. When the band was formed, we were sort of local. Chris Black lived pretty close to me, 15, 20 minutes away. Chris Kearns, our bass player, lived maybe an hour and a half north of where we lived. And Tim lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so that was maybe 4 or 5 hours away, but at least we were all in the same state. But the focus was never really on rehearsing and performing live. That sort of the focus of Pharaoh from the very beginning was to write and record music. So, in this day and age, you kind of don't really need to get together to do that anymore. We all had recording systems that we could make demos on, and we would write songs or pieces of songs and send them to the other guys who would flesh them out. It would all come back to me, and I would kind of make the master demo, and we would we'd learn our parts, go to the studio, and knock it all out. And, we didn't even do that together. The drums would be first, and then I would go in and do guitar, and then bass, and then Tim would do vocals somewhere else. And that's kind of just the way we've always done it. It was always this long-distance thing. It wasn't too long after the second album. Actually, I guess after we started recording the second album, that Chris Black moved out to Chicago. Tim then moved to Florida. We were really spread out. And yeah, it was just never really practical to even consider getting together to rehearse in the traditional sense. So it was all incumbent on everybody to learn the parts that were written and to perform them accurately in the studio. So yeah, in fact, the other 2 guys didn't even meet Tim until maybe a year after the first album was released.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've been a band, but we're not, we're not exactly, like living on top of one another. So we kind of say at this point that that's one of the reasons we've been so successful as a band, is that, we don't have to see one another very often.
Right.
We don't have like the interpersonal struggles and baggage that, bands that, are together all the time have to worry about. So we can just sort of concentrate on the music and trust that, you know, if any sort of personal conflicts arise, it'll go away within a couple weeks, and then we won't have to worry about one another for a while.
Right. So what's changed? So you said you're rehearsing. So is everybody closer to each other now?
No, this is also kind of confusing. Well, Tim moved back to Pittsburgh, so he's at least again in the same state, but Chris Black is still in Chicago. But here's what is very confusing about the Pharaoh live experience. Chris Kearns is not really. I guess he just doesn't want to commit to the rehearsing and to being available to do these live shows. So he said, find somebody else. Now, it seems like the easy thing to do then would just be find a bass player and, we're off to the races. Except that Chris Black, as you may or may not know, is also a bass player. He plays bass and sings in 3 other bands, Dawnbringer, Super Christ, and High Spirits. And I think he prefers being at the front of the stage than the back of the stage. So he suggested, hey, how about I play bass and we get another drummer? So that's what we did. And we played 2 gigs in 2008. With a drummer named Scott Haskett, who was an old acquaintance of Chris's, but now he's no longer available, and we had to find yet another drummer. To play live, also, we need 2 guitar players. I mean, the amount of guitars we have on the album, strictly speaking, we should probably have 6 or 7, but that's sort of impractical. So we get one more, and the guy we've roped in for that is Matt Crooks, who is our engineer producer. So he used to be in a band called Division, who were based in the sort of Northern Virginia area, and that band is still around, and I got in touch with their drummer, James Getz, and so he's playing drums for us for, any live commitments that we make. And James lives in Baltimore, and Matt lives down in D.C. I live outside of Philadelphia, so it kind of makes sense to centralize the rehearsal in Baltimore, so I rented space down there. And once a week, Matt drives up and I drive down, and James is right there. And just the 3 of us rehearse. And then we bring in the other guys, Chris and Tim, like once a month because, we've got to fly Chris in. Tim takes the train. Right. We get together for a weekend. We rehearse. We hang out and party, and it's a good time. So that's working out so far. We're booked to play a festival in Chicago called Ragnarocker, which is mostly old school sorts of bands like Brokus Helm is headlining one night, Virgin Steel's headlining another night, Slaughter Destroys is playing, that old band Damien Thorne is playing, and then some smaller true metal type bands. Borrowed Time is one, Sons of Thunder I think is another one, Voltax from Mexico is playing. So that's what we've got booked, and we're going to so much trouble to rehearse that I think it would be a waste to just play a single show. So probably in late June, early July, we'll start playing some shows around here. We would like to actually tour Europe because that's kind of where the action is for a band like Pharaoh, and our label's obviously based over there. So we're talking to some people and seeing what we can set up, but we don't really have anything concrete nailed down yet.
Yeah, well, good luck to that because I totally agree. That's definitely where the action is.
Yeah. And the thing is, we don't have delusions that, playing live is going to become like an income stream for us. I mean, we're probably going to lose money playing live.
Right.
But, Pharaoh has done pretty well not playing live. We get a lot of good reviews. We sell pretty well. People seem to like what we do. But I think the metal world being what it is, a certain part of the population just isn't going to take your band seriously unless you play live. So I think that it's something, we obviously enjoy doing it, but it's something I think that we need to do if we want to take any other steps to sort of grow the band, is to at least be known as a live band. And if nothing else, maybe we can get some offers to do some of those great European festivals.
Right, exactly. So this album, Buried the Light, where did you guys record that?
We recorded it with Matt Crooks down in Virginia. We've done the last 3 albums with him. It was only the debut that we recorded elsewhere. And it works out really well with Matt because he sort of got into the recording game to record his old band Division. They had been, recording at other studios, and it came time for them to do the 3rd album. And I guess Matt had an interest in engineering and whatnot, so he bit the bullet, took out some loans, bought some gear, and, set up a studio. And they were working on that album. Maybe they had just finished recording it when we started talking about this, and we were at some gig together, he and I, and uh, we'd both drunk a bit, and he's like, "You should come down and record with me." And I was like, "Well, our budget's not huge." He's like, "Whatever your budget is, I'll do it for that." And we've sort of held him to that ever since.
Right. That's nice.
Yeah, I mean, it would probably be impossible for Pharaoh to exist and get these albums recorded if it wasn't for Matt. I mean, we take a lot of time to do our albums. We make sure everything is done properly, and with Matt, we don't have to worry about how much time's on the clock. He's there to get it done. He records a few other things, but I think maybe there had been the goal at one point for him to make the studio a proper commercial operation, but now it basically exists to record Pharaoh and his projects and a couple other friends things. So it's just another hobby for him. So we're not competing with other bands when we're working with Matt. He's we're the only thing he's working on, and he puts as much time into it as is needed. And believe me, that can be a lot of time. So yeah, it's great working with Matt, and he keeps buying better new gear. And I mean, I hardly use any of my own stuff. I even track my rhythm guitars with one of his guitars because it sounds better than mine.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a system that's worked out pretty well. I mean, it's a little bit of a drag hauling down to Virginia as much as I have to, but his wife's a friend of my wife, so we take the kids down there, and yeah, it's just have a good time.
Sounds good. So what's your band's process for writing an album? How do you guys go about that?
Well, it's kind of a two-tiered project. Ultimately, we're a fairly collaborative band insofar as everybody in the band writes music and lyrics for a Pharaoh album. But it doesn't start with a couple guys in the rehearsal room knocking something out, obviously, because we haven't really rehearsed until just recently. And in that case, it's the guys who aren't really in the band that are rehearsing with me.
Right.
So the way it works is, for me personally, I'll write a complete song with the riffs, the arrangement, the drum part, and everything, just no vocals. And then I'll pass that on to Tim, and he'll write vocal lines. And sometimes he writes the lyrics, and sometimes he just writes the music for the vocal lines. And another one of us will write the lyrics for it. Chris Black tends to approach his songwriting a little more holistically, in that he usually writes the whole song. He writes riffs, arrangements, vocal parts, lyrics, the whole nine. Chris Curtis does that sometimes, and some other times he'll write half a song, and he'll give me sort of a skeleton, say, can you fill this out? Can you add some riffs here? And even on the last album, when we did the song Cry, he had the barest of skeletons for that song, and he actually came over for a weekend, and we just knocked it out until it was finished. And then we gave that to Tim. Tim wrote the melodies, and then he gave that to Chris Black, and he wrote the words. So that song's got all of our names on it. And yeah, that's kind of how it works. So we, the germ, sort of the main instrumental part usually comes from a single guy, and then it's sort of introduced to the rest of the group for elaboration.
Okay, well, very cool. I appreciate you sharing that. Where can people purchase this album currently from?
Well, I mean, not that many record stores anymore. If you have a metal shop in your area, there's a good chance they'll have it. Our distributor in the States is a pretty big distributor, so it's not hard to get the album. But, nowadays I assume that most people like me, and if they're buying CDs at all, they're buying them online. And Amazon has it. You can get it from any of the big metal retailers like The End or Century Media or, whoever. I mean, Cruz del Sur has enough bands on its roster and enough of a reputation that I think most places that carry this kind of music, I mean, we're obviously not going to be in an all death metal mail order, but any place that's carrying traditional or power metal there's a good chance that they'll have it. So yeah, it's not too hard to come by. And then, like I said, Amazon and any of the other big online retailers will have it as well. Okay.
And do you have like merchandise, T-shirts, and stuff like that you're selling somewhere too?
We sort of do. Yeah. to date, we've only printed one T-shirt design, and it's basically the cover of The Longest Night, and that's available directly through the band. You can go to ProfessorBlack.com. That's our drummer's sort of distro. He also sells CDs and stuff like that, and I believe that he still has those shirts in stock. But now that we have this new album coming out and we're going to be doing some shows, we're definitely putting more thought into merchandise. And in fact, I just started getting the designs back from a shirt I commissioned from an artist, and we'll probably also do a couple more shirts that are essentially based on the album covers. So yeah, within the next few months, I expect we'll have 3 or 4 designs out there for sale, and again, they'll all be available through Chris's distro. So ProfessorBlack.com is the place to go for Pharaoh stuff.
Okay, right on. And speaking of artists and designs, who did the cover for the album? Because it's killer.
Yeah, that was done by a French artist named J.P. Fournier. At this point, he's done everything for us. He's done 5 CD covers for us. I don't know if we found him in the beginning. He's a pretty well-known artist. He did the Immortal album in Heart of Winter, which is like a pretty great cover. He did a few of the Ed Guy albums. He's done a lot of stuff, and maybe a couple Dragon Force albums. I think the first couple Dragon Force. But yeah, I don't remember who put us together in the first place, but it's always worked out really well. We give him these sort of broad stroke conceptual ideas, and then he just runs with it and always looks great. And we sort of consider him our Derek Riggs now. He's done everything so far. He's done more paintings for Pharaoh than for any other band. So I think we have a relationship, and he's definitely sort of part of the extended Pharaoh family at this point. And I can't imagine ever using another artist to do our covers than JP. He's just a great guy.
So do you guys kind of give him an idea, or do you just kind of give him the music and say, hey, okay, make something from this?
He never hears the music when he works on this stuff. Usually when he's working on it, we're still working on the mix and that sort of thing. We have a title ready, and usually we have the basic gist of what the cover is going to be. I mean, for that first album, we said, okay, let's make it look like a sort of a post-apocalyptic setting with this glowing phoenix egg type thing, which was supposed to represent the rebirth of civilization. And that's exactly what he painted. For the next one, I think we gave him even maybe a little less than that, and he came up with another killer cover. And when he did that, he sort of put the egg-like thing, which became more of a gem-like thing, on the cover, and that's sort of become our quote-unquote mascot. We have this gem figure on every single cover. So when it comes time for a new album, we work out a title. It's usually a discussion between Chris Black and I as to what the actual image is going to look like. And then we tell him, for this one, we said we want a sarcophagus type thing, sort of shaped like the gem that's cracking open and lights coming out. And that was pretty much all we gave him. That's, took it and ran. He put it sort of set it in this cave, made it looks great. So that's one of the things about him, is that we can give him these 2 or 3 sentence descriptions, and he turns it into just a fantastic piece of art. And he always sends us a sketch, and the sketch ends up, as we do each album, the sketch looks more and more like the final thing, because I think we've kind of gotten in tune with one another.
That's awesome. Very cool. What got you into music? What were your influences growing up that made you want to do this?
Well, early in life, I basically listened to one band. I listened to the Police. I somehow got a Police record when I was 6, and I was just nuts for that band thereafter. And I, probably had cassettes that, my relatives or whatever gave me at the holidays, but it wasn't until I was maybe 13, 14 that I got into metal. And that was almost like a peer pressure type situation, like the guys I rode the bus with listened to metal, and I wasn't really listening to anything. And it's that age where you sort of have to start defining yourself as a person, and I didn't have any better ideas. So
I totally get that. I kind of did it the same way. It was like junior high, and so when I started listening to Metallica, I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool.
I knew these bands' names because they talked about them, but I hadn't really heard them. And I got a job working at McDonald's, and I took my earnings and I went and bought Kill 'Em All, and I think Peace Sells were like my first metal albums, and I was hooked right from then. And I pretty quickly got into the more underground stuff. I mean, those guys were still listening to, they were into Dokken and that sort of crap, and I'm listening to Coroner and Death and anything I could get that was metal. And I guess I was lucky in that I was happy to listen to death metal or melodic stuff or traditional stuff. So whereas a lot of people, they kind of go down the path of a single small genre right from the beginning, I was always fairly omnivorous in my metal. And one of the bands I really liked when I was a kid was Sodom, the Anthrax band. And then when I went to college, Sodom sort of seemed to disappear. A lot of the bands that I liked started to disappear. This was the early '90s. I started college in '92, so we all know what happened. A lot of these bands lost their deals, and if they were putting anything out, they were only putting it out in Europe. And I actually wrote to the magazine Metal Maniacs. They had like a letters column, and I said, "Hey, what's going on with these bands?" And I gave them a list of bands. Sodom was one of them. I don't remember who all the other ones were. And they said, "Oh, Sodom just released this album in Europe, so on and so forth." And it's like, man, it's out there. I got to find a way to get it. So that's when I started, really digging around into the underground stuff. And at first, I was getting what are essentially pretty big bands. I mean, Sodom was never like an underground band. I just had to mail order this from Europe, and that seemed weird in the early '90s, because back then we were buying everything in the store.
Right.
And I was reading a lot of magazines, and then I started buying zines and, making contacts in the underground. And, one thing just led to another. And I had played guitar a long time. I picked it up shortly after I started listening to metal. And I had like a crappy death metal band in high school. But after that, I never really did anything else with it, formally. But I always played. I was always still playing guitar. So when I met Chris Black, we sort of met through the zine scene. He had a zine called Word of Mouth. I had one called Feast or Famine, and we had traded zines. And he was actually already Dawnbringer at the time, which was then a lot more sort of a black and death metal thing. And yeah, he and this guy Keith were at a party, and they decided they wanted to do something a little more traditional. They were listening to the album Unleash the Beast by Sax, and they're like, yeah, we want to do something like this. So they said, let's get a band together. And he's like, I know the perfect guy to play second guitar. And so he called me up and said, you want to do this. And while it wasn't really my intention to do, old-fashioned Saxon type stuff, I was like, sure, I like that as much as anything else. And I kind of figured that I would be able to steer the ship sort of more toward the European style power metal that I liked at the time. And yeah, once we got together, it just sort of clicked musically, and it wasn't very long before I felt that there weren't really any limits on what I did musically in the band.
Very nice. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. What how did you guys? So all that happened to start the band. How did you guys name it Pharaoh?
That was something that Chris brought to the table day one. I mean, he said, we're going to put this band together, and it's going to be called Pharaoh. Hold on a second. Hold on. I got an interloper in the interview room.
Oh, that's okay.
Get away. Mommy's got to take him out. Sorry.
No,
so,
it's all good, man.
Yeah, when he said we're going to start this band, it's going to be called Pharaoh. So he had it right from the very beginning, and there was never any discussion. He just said the band's going to be called Pharaoh, and I said, all right. So, the way it happened, he called and said, "You can do this?" I said, "Sure." And he's like, "Well, let's get together this weekend." So he and I went over to this guy Keith's house, and the three of us wrote a song that night. And the next day, we went to Keith's rehearsal space. We also had some recording gear, and we knocked the song out in a couple hours. The song eventually became called "Slaves" on the first album. And yeah, we have somewhere in my archives, I've got a tape that says Pharaoh, and that song had another title. I don't remember what it was, but it was pretty corny, whatever it was. I mean, it was like Unleash the Night or something like that. I don't know where that title came from either, because obviously it had no lyrics. I think maybe Chris just put that on there. Who knows? So yeah, that's how that all started, and that's why we're Pharaoh. And some of the other things, like when we recorded that first album and JP did the painting, we gave it to the guy who did the layout for the label, and he came up with that logo. So we didn't even make that. So it's none of this has really had a lot of thought it put into it, but it's all worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it just all kind of came easy. That's cool. So what sets you guys apart? Why should people listen to you guys? There's 1,000 metal bands out there. How are you guys different?
Well, I happen to think we have one of the better singers in heavy metal, and Tim is also one of very few singers in the scene today that really doesn't sound like anyone else. I mean, Tim sounds like Tim. You could sort of compare him to maybe someone like Graham Bonnet or Jeff Scott Soto, but not really. I mean, Tim is Tim. He doesn't sound like Dickinson. He doesn't sound like Tate. He doesn't sound like Kiska. He doesn't sound like anybody. But beyond that, I think that Pharaoh is just a band with a commitment to craft depth that a lot of other metal bands just don't have. The music we play, we refer to it as American power metal, which would encompass bands like, I don't know, Jag Panzer or Crimson, or the classic stuff. And I think the thing that makes American power metal different from European is that American power metal is guitar oriented and European power metal is vocal oriented. You think of any of those bands that are sort of sprung from the Halloween tree, and half of their guitar works are just like whole note power chords while the singer does his thing. Whereas I think that our stuff is a lot rippier and a lot more interesting in most ways than most of the other bands playing this sort of traditional and melodic stuff. And at the same time, while we do obviously have our roots in traditional melodic metal, we're not a retro band. So you don't have to feel like you're listening to a bunch of Civil War reenactors when...
So, okay. Anything else that you want to tell the world about Pharaoh that we haven't talked about?
No, I think that we've gone over most of the things that one talks about in this sort of conversation. Like I said, we are going to be playing live, so if you're interested in seeing us in your area, get in touch, and we'll try to work something out. We're not the sort of band that needs to make money. We're trying not to lose too much when we go out on tour, but there's always exceptions to be made. So anyone who's interested in Pharaoh, please get in touch. We love hearing from people, and we're always quick to write back or what have you.
Okay, well, I will. I'll keep an eye out for things to come from you guys, and we'll definitely help promote. Speaking of promoting, before I forget, I want to thank Clawhammer for getting us together and making this happen. So kudos to those guys.
Those guys are great. We'd never used them before. They're sort of our new promo company, and they did a great job.
Yeah, they've sent me so many good bands. I just love working with those guys. So
cool. It's good to know.
So one last thing to ask you. Do you mind making a couple radio tags for me?
No problem at all.
Okay, so the first one, if you can say, this is Pharaoh, and you're listening to DJ REM at rockaddictradio.com. DJ REM?
Yep. Okay, you ready?
Yep, and you can say, you can say Matt too. You can if you
sure.
want. That's cool.
Hey, this is Matt from Pharaoh, and you're listening to DJ REM on Rock Addict Radio. Stay heavy.
Perfect. And then the second one, same thing, but just a generic station tag that I can send the other DJs.
Okay. All right, sure. This is Matt from Pharaoh, and you're listening to Rock Addict Radio. Stay hard.
Perfect. Totally appreciate it, man.
No problem.